This is what it looks like when a journalist actually does his job and grills a Pentagon stooge to drill down to the fact of the matter that they're spewing nothing but BS. This is journalist Matt Lee grilling the Pentagon's John Kirby.
To look at this and say the reason that the Russian army is on NATO, the Russian army is at NATO's doorstep is because NATO has expanded rather than the Russians expanding. That, in other words, NATO has moved closer to Russia rather than Russia moving closer to NATO. Is that not an accurate way to look at this?
I think that's the way President Putin probably looks at it. It's certainly not the way that we look at it.
You don't think that NATO has expanded eastward toward Russia?
NATO has expanded,
okay.
and the expansion has been a good thing for...
So the reason that the Russian army is at NATO's doorstep is not the fault of the Russian army, it's not the Russian army that's done it. It's NATO has moved closer to moved
I'm pretty
east.
sure it wasn't NATO who was ordering, upwards of 15 battalion tactical groups to within 10 kilometers of the border with Ukraine. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't NATO who put little green men inside Ukraine to destabilize eastern states.
I'm pretty sure that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So unless that's changed,
it's not changed. But I'm pretty sure the movement by Russia is Russia's decision.
If NATO has moved east, the reason that the Russian army is closer or on NATO's doorstep is because NATO moved.
NATO is not an anti-Russia alliance. NATO is a security alliance.
Watch.
Unfortunately, for 50 years, it was an anti-Soviet alliance. So do you not understand it?
Look at Kirby's face when he says that. Look at this.
For 50 years, it was an anti-Soviet alliance.
That's the look of, oh my gosh, I literally have no argument, and this journalist is raking me over the coals while it's being recorded. What do I do?
So do you not understand it? So do you not understand how, or can you not even see how the Russians will perceive it as a threat? And the fact that it keeps getting closer to their border while their troops, I mean, the places where their troops are, you say their troops are, and may have been in Ukraine and Georgia, are not NATO members.
I'm not going to pretend to know what goes in President Putin's mind or Russian military commanders. I mean, okay. I barely got a history degree at the University of South Florida.
Well, tell me this, John Kirby, what would go through your mind if you found out that Russian or Chinese forces were setting up shop in Canada or Mexico? What if they were setting up military stations right along our northern and southern border? How would you feel about that as a Pentagon official, as a high-ranking official?
What I can tell you is that NATO is a defensive alliance. It remains a defensive alliance.
Fair enough, but it has moved east. Correct? I mean, that's just a fact.
It has expanded, absolutely.
Right, exactly.
But there's no reason for anybody to think the expansion is a hostile or threatening move. And we've been saying that throughout the last 15 years, man.
You're moving closer to Russia. You're blaming the Russians for being close to NATO.
No.
Yeah, he is.
That's exactly what Hagel said.
We're blaming the Russians for violating the territorial integrity of Ukraine and destabilizing the security situation inside Europe.
Which is not a NATO member.
I see
other countries feel threatened.
We're going to talk more about this in a second. Roll the intro. I want to thank Noble Gold for sponsoring today's video. Most Americans don't own sound money. Sound money is defined by the Constitution as gold and silver. It's been accepted as sound money for over 5,000 years. And even though it's been artificially suppressed by the international banking cartel, it was the best performing investment class for 2022. In that year, the S&P was down 20%, the Dow was down 10%, and Bitcoin was down over 65%. Gold and silver outperformed them all. Open a gold or silver IRA with Noble Gold Investments this month and get this quarter-ounce American Gold Eagle for free with every qualified IRA of $50K or more. With thousands of 5-star reviews, there's a lot of happy people who are glad they went with Noble Gold. Check them out with my link in the description and in the pinned comment. Now, back to today's video. These are the NATO nations right here so far. There's about 30 of them. There they are right there on the screen. And then we're going to flip back to this map. But they did move eastward toward Russia. Russia didn't advance toward NATO, the NATO countries. NATO advanced eastward toward Russia. So how is Russia supposed to feel about this situation right here? Here's Russia over here. Here in blue are all the NATO nations, including Canada and the United States. So you've got all the NATO nations advancing eastward toward Russia. And now you got Russia going, hey, we really can't have this, which is exactly what America would say if China or Russia were advancing on our northern or southern border. I like a lot of this dialogue between Patrick, Bet, David, and Jimmy Dore. Listen to this.
Nothing makes me happier than when you actually see a really good reporter that has the balls to do stuff like that and isn't silenced because they're scared about losing their job. I love things like that.
But that's a guy named Matt Lee.
And Matt Lee probably won't be a part of that journalism bank that goes and questions any Pentagon official anymore. If he is there, I'll be surprised.
Journalist. Good guy named Matt Lee. What are your thoughts when you see that?
Well, it's obvious that they don't want you to know the real history. They don't want you to know that when Germany was allowed to reunify, the promise from NATO to Russia was that we won't expand NATO. And then, of course, it did. I think there's 13 or something more countries that they put into NATO. And now they wanted to put Ukraine into NATO or threaten to do that. That would be like if Russia got into a military alliance with Mexico and they wanted to start putting military bases in Mexico. We wouldn't allow that. We wouldn't allow it. And just like what happened in Cuba with the missile crisis in the 60s, we wouldn't allow stuff like that. But we're doing that, and people don't want you to know that this NATO is not a defensive, it is offensive. This is a war that was.
And you could see that with that Pentagon official, John Kirby. He did not want to answer the question. The question was very clear. He didn't want to answer. Well, NATO is expanding. Yeah, NATO's expanding. Expanding where? What, north? Expanding south? Expanding west? No, they're expanding eastward toward who? They're expanding toward who? Oh, that's right. They're expanding toward Russia. Yeah, but this isn't, this is not posturing. I mean, nobody should feel threatened by another nation advancing toward another nation's borders. Not at all.
Started and provoked by NATO and the West. Zelensky ran on peace. He ran on bringing the country back together, right? The Russian speakers in the East, the Donbass, but he didn't do it. So why? Because he got threatened by NATO and the ultra-right, the Nazis in Ukraine. And so they threatened to kill. He knows he's a dead man if he...
That's the Azov battalion, by the way.
Does a peace.
And they're still alive and well in Ukraine. Speaking of Ukraine, let's listen to this. We'll get back to Jimmy Dore in a second, but listen to what creepy, sleepy Uncle Joe Biden said about Ukraine. We're going to be supporting Ukrainian pensions too, by the way. Yeah, we have poor people. Yeah, we have deteriorating infrastructure and bridges are falling and we don't have clean water in Flint, Michigan and other places. But we have to support the pensions of the Ukrainians. That's our American duty. It's our obligation.
And to deliver much needed humanitarian assistance as well as food, water, medicine, shelter, and other aid to Ukrainians displaced by Russia's war, and provide aid for those seeking refuge in other countries from Ukraine. It's also going to help schools and hospitals open. It's going to allow pensions and social support to be paid to the Ukrainian people so they have something in their pocket.
Pensions and social support, food, military hardware. We're going to give them everything. Isn't it interesting? Maybe it's just me, but you got leftists out there who are wanting to take guns and ammo from Americans, but give guns and ammo to the Ukrainians. How does that make any sense? Oh, that's right. It doesn't.
It's also going to provide critical resources to address food shortages around the globe.
Peace deal with Russia, so that's why he won't. And when they had a peace deal in March, and that's when Boris Johnson from the UK flew there and said, hey, you don't do this. And he killed the peace deal. So Russia is the one that wants peace in this deal, and Ukraine and NATO do not. They want to bleed Russia economically, and that's why they blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
But if you hear people say that, what Jimmy Dore just said, if you hear them say, hey, the people that want peace in this scenario is Russia, well, then you're a Putin sympathizer.
And they
allegedly,
they've always said they were going to do it, and they did it.
And that's what I stand by. If Newland and Biden said they were going to do it, then this is one of those Occam's razor situations. Take the situation, shed off all the complexity and drill down to the simplicity. And that's probably what it is. It's probably the people who blew it up are probably the people who said they were going to blow it up. How is that complex?
And I don't, for the life of me, I can't get why the European nations are going along with this. They've said stuff like, there was the foreign minister of Germany said, I don't care about my people if they don't want this. I care about the people of Ukraine. What leader of a country says they don't care about their own people, but they
And what people would tolerate such a leader? And yet, here we are.
care more about somebody else's country. It's crazy what's going on. So people don't realize that NATO has provoked this. In fact, there was a peace agreement in 2014. The CIA helped overthrow the Ukraine government. And then the
Obama.
people in the Donbass didn't want to go along with this coup government, right? Because the leader of Ukraine wanted to be friendlier economically with Russia instead of join like the European Union. And that they couldn't have that, right? So that's why they did a coup. And the people, the Russian speakers in the Donbass didn't want to go along with that coup. And so they kind of wanted to break away. Ukraine government started shelling the Donbass, and so they had a peace agreement called the Minsk Agreement, and that was supposed to give them independence. They were supposed to have their own elections, and they were going to stop shelling them. They never did. They ended up killing like 14 or 15,000 people in the Donbass over the last 8 years, and now it's been revealed that that peace agreement was never real. The Merkel, the former prime minister of Germany, just admitted that the only reason they did that peace agreement was to give Ukraine enough time to build up its military, so when they finally did provoke an invasion, which is what they did, that they would have a military ready to fight Russia. And so people don't know this is what happened. And so they just think that one day Putin woke up and said, I want to go invade Ukraine because I'm a maniac. And they think that he's the bad guy. They think that he's acting rationally. We always knew he would do this. In fact, we were counting on him doing this. That's why we did what we did. And they don't know that Ukraine ramped up their bombing right before the war started last year. They doubled their bombing. They were really trying to provoke it, and they did. And they provoked it. And the Russia would rather have a peace agreement. The rest of the world would rather have a peace agreement. Not NATO, not Joe Biden, not the military-industrial complex. And so that...
Yeah, and as long as there are profits in war, there will be little incentive for peace. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know. Don't forget to subscribe to my private email list through my website, highimpactflix.com. If you want to support this channel, grab a hard-hitting conversation starting design from the store. You can put on a shirt, hoodie, mug, cell phone case, whatever you want. Got brand new designs in there you want to take a look at. Also, I've got a channel called Here's the Deal. It's a police accountability, public servant accountability channel. You want to check that out. The link's in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video.